Hello and welcome everyone to Hot Topics, a DuraSpace Members webinar series. My name is Christy Searle and I will be facilitating today's session. A few housekeeping items before we get started. For your convenience, there is a Q&A feature located in your menu. At the end of the presentation, we will be taking questions from our audience and we'll ask you to post your questions there at that time. Today's webinar is being recorded and both the recording and presentation slides will be made available after today's presentation. We are pleased to have you with us for our final webinar in our series, Beyond North America, Widening Access and Participation. During today's webinar, How For-Profit Companies Can Be a Part of the Open Environment, we will be joined by three presenters who will share with us how for-profit business models can be compatible with participating in the open access revolution. At this time, I would like to turn it over to our first speaker, the Chief Digital Officer of Hindawi, Andrew Smeall.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Andrew Smeall. Thanks, Christy. And I'm going to talk a bit about Hindawi and also the open source projects that we're doing, our technology projects, and how we see those working as a for-profit company. So next slide, please. Sorry. Next, Christy, can you hear me? Yeah, next.
Yes. Are you on the third slide about Hindawi?
Oh, sorry. It's still showing. I think there's a delay. I'm still seeing the.
Okay, hang on one second.
Yeah. Okay, but the third slide is where we should be.
And that is what I'm showing on my screen.
That's okay.
Aren't seeing it yet?
This is Brian. I've still got the first slide too.
Okay, hang on just a second. I'm not sure. Okay, guys, I apologize. Hang on one second. I'm going to stop sharing.
I could take over sharing if you want. We can do it that way.
Let's just try this.
Okay, yeah, that looks good to me.
Okay.
So Handare Limited, in case you guys don't know, we're an open access publisher. We publish 231 journals across STEM and medicine. We were founded in 1997 as a subscription publisher originally, focused on mathematics. Starting in 2004, we began the process of transitioning to become an open access publisher. And by 2007, we had flipped our entire catalog to Gold OA. So we're now an exclusively Gold OA publisher. And in addition to that, we build our own technology systems. So we have a peer review system and a production system and a content management platform that we developed in-house. Next. So in this talk, I want to talk about two things that kind of go behind our technology strategy. So these are two things that we believe are mostly true. I don't think they're always true, but they're mostly true. Authors don't choose a journal based on the technology that's underlying that journal. They choose it for other reasons, whether it's prestige or community or the subject area of the journal, the editorial board, but not because of the submission system that the journal uses. And the second thing is that publishers benefit from network effects, or maybe it would be more accurate to call it economies of scope. But so a publisher that operates, say, a discovery service or a reference management service can use data from that service to drive authors towards their journals. And if they control downstream data services, those services benefit from knowing what the authors are publishing. They can cascade papers into their own journals. So the bigger a publisher's program, the more they benefit. So those two things are true. Next. So why we think open source is so important is because several big players in the publishing space right now are trying to create walled gardens that are end-to-end technology systems that a researcher or an author can follow from the beginning of their research career as an undergrad all the way through to retirement. So services for publishing papers, peer-reviewing papers, but also things like repositories and search engines and reference managers and analytics. So you have several people right now attempting to build these scholarly infrastructures, but they're doing it in a closed way. They're doing it in a way that's proprietary and locks in researchers or universities to their ecosystem and doesn't make it easy to integrate between systems. And we think this is going to have the effect of making competition more difficult, stifling innovation, and driving up cost. And the original vision of the open access movement was really a movement that would let publishers compete more freely, that would make publishing into a service industry where authors would choose to publish with particular publishers because they provided a good service, not because they were locked into a particular journal or because of an impact factor or some other product of the system that was beyond their control. Next. So at Hindawi, we've built our strategy around this idea of these commitments to openness in different areas. So in addition to open access, and all our papers are open access, we are committed to making the products that we build open source, to making the data inside those products to the greatest extent possible open and available. So obviously certain data remains private for various reasons, but where we can, we make that data open, available to external systems, available through open APIs. And we use open standards when we integrate with other systems so that we don't require you to have some kind of bespoke data model in order to access the data from our systems. It should all be reusable as much as possible. And that when we have contracts with, say, a society or an institution, those contracts should be as much as possible short-term, no secret terms, no long-term lock-in, no secret prices, so that we remove this issue of lock-in from the system as much as possible. So in 2017, we began working with a community called Coco to rebuild all of our platforms as open source projects. So next. So Coco is short for the Collaborative Knowledge Foundation. And this is a nonprofit based in San Francisco that was started by some people who came out of the Public Library of Science. And they are a community of developers, publishers, archives, repositories, university presses that are all developing open source tools on a shared framework. And we collaborate on both on the code base that we work off of, which is called PubSuite, and also we collaborate on things like our vision for how these products should look, the design of the products, the user interfaces of the products, and the workflows, and what we think is the optimal, say, peer review workflow or book production workflow. So it's really a collaborative community that does more than just collaborate on code, but collaborates across the workflow for publishing. And the reason we chose this approach is because with an open source community like that, we still get to control our own development roadmap. We can still decide we want to work on this feature or that feature, or we want to customize the software this way or that way. But the community benefits in other ways. So we collaborate to distribute costs. We benefit from each other's expertise, and we reduce variation and complexity between our systems. So we don't feel like it's necessary for every system that we develop to have its own, every journal that we run to have its own bespoke editorial workflow. Sometimes it's better for the authors, for the editors, and also for the production team to have some uniformity across the journal. So by working together, we can try to find ways to make editorial workflows more uniform. So next, please. So this is a quick example of some projects that we're doing in the Coco community right now. eLife, the biomed journal, is redoing their peer review system. This is going to be a very forward-thinking, collaborative peer review system. They have quite a hierarchical editorial model, but the peer review is done in the open, and there's a lot of discussion and chat, and all this is going to be baked into their peer review model. Europe PMC is building a system to ingest articles into the Europe PMC archive. So this requires reviewing the metadata of these articles and approving them for admission into the archive. The University of California Press is building a system, a peer review system for their journal Collabora, a psychology journal that is going to be almost a Google Docs style peer review system where editors and authors can work together on a version of the manuscript and input changes directly to the manuscript during the peer review process. And Hindawi, we're building actually a fairly straightforward peer review system that can power a slightly more traditional workflow for a publisher with scale. So someone who's trying to operate multiple journals on a single instance and have staff working across multiple journals and a large number of submissions. We're all using the same pub suite, the same underlying open source technology to do that. Next. So the point of this webinar is to talk a bit about how we make this work. So how do we prevent, say, a for-profit company from co-opting the system? So one of the goals of working with Coco was to figure out ways to fix this problem. So we have a nonprofit at the core of the program. So that's Coco itself. And that means that Coco controls the code base. And they, when we make a commitment as Hindawi, when we develop a change or a new feature, we release that feature to the community, and then it becomes Coco's job to steward that feature from then on. And what that does is it means that Coco is fundamentally unacquirable. So even if Hindawi were to be acquired as a private company, the code base would remain in Coco's control. And Coco's job, part of Coco's job, is to make sure that the community is vibrant and there's always multiple developers and different institutions working on the code, so that it's not monopolized by one person. We also, as I said, we work very collaboratively. So we share our roadmaps. We share more than just code. We share design. We share product vision. We share strategy. And we make sure to have a very inclusive community. So we allow not just for-profit companies like publishers, but also there's a role for service providers and both nonprofit and for-profit service providers, libraries. Anyone that is a potential stakeholder for any of the systems is welcome to join the community. We just work as a community to make sure we have some agreed ways of working, that we make sure to work collaboratively, that we are all good citizens, and we try to both contribute and take out of the community. And the idea is that these for-profit service providers or for-profit members of the community can provide really important sustainability to the community, because they often have resources to provide development services or to develop new features. Often that's difficult for a smaller society or an institution. So we can work together in interesting ways. We benefit, say, from the expertise of the society, and they can benefit from our developer time to develop new features. Next. And the reason this works is because although we're investing a lot in this technology and ultimately giving it away for free, we don't see other people using our technology as a threat to us in any way. In fact, there's benefits to it. Not only benefits to, in terms of more members to the community and contributions to the community itself, but also just benefits in general, because we think our software that we're developing and the platforms that we're developing are going to move scholarly communications forwards in interesting ways. They're going to allow for more open science type applications. They're going to be easier to develop on and easier to innovate. So that's all really important to us. And so what's coming next is we're trying to move into other areas of the ecosystem. So that means integration with repositories. That means systems for production, for publishing, for CMS, for displaying content online, and systems for back office, quality assurance, and checking that we do in our editorial systems. We're also looking to make sure we keep growing the community and make sure that the community is healthy and has a good mix of people, service providers that are doing development work, and institutions, and for-profit applications and nonprofit applications. Next. So this slide is where you can find out more about the Coco community. It's all, like I said, open source. That Mattermost link, Mattermost is like an open source version of Slack. It's a chat app where you can come ask questions. There's always people on there. You can find out, links to the different projects, or you can ask people to fill you in on the details of what they're working on. The code base is there under the PubSuite code base. It's all open source. Like I said, you can see all the different projects in there, and Coco's website is there if you want to learn more about them. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we'll talk about it at the end.
Great, thank you, Andrew. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Brian.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. So my name is Brian Hull. I'm the CEO of Ubiquity Press. And what I'll do is I'll give you a quick talk about why Ubiquity Press as a for-profit company, what we see as the strengths of that, but why we're also an unconditionally open company, and how we're trying to become more and more involved in the open community as we grow. Next, please. So just a very quick background to us, in case you don't know about us. We are really a company that we're researcher-led, and we were born as an open press. We've never done subscription publishing. We've never considered that as a model. We're just 100% open in our culture. And really our mission is to try and bring about a sort of a revolution in open publishing by making our platform available to universities and libraries and societies to use, and giving them the capacity to publish themselves, so that we get away from a model where publishing is controlled by large organizations that monopolize resources and funding. So we spun out of University College London in 2012, but we've grown very quickly with this model. We have about almost 600 journals now. We publish a lot of open access books, and we have about 30 partner presses, which are the libraries and university presses we work with, enabling them to publish open access. And what we also do is we try to be as comprehensive as possible. So we don't just do journals and books. We also get involved in open conference publishing, open access repositories, data and software publishing, hardware, bioresources, and all of that kind of thing. So we're really trying to be an enabler for publishing the entire scientific life cycle of resources. Next, please. So, but at the beginning, the key point is that we are a for-profit company. And in the climate today, a lot of universities and libraries question very seriously whether they want to partner or work with for-profit companies. So, I mean, our reason to be for-profit is that we want to be a commercially viable, non-funding dependent organization. We started off with a couple of grants in the UK from the JISC to help us get started, but we want to be fully funding independent. We want to be able to stand on our own 2 feet and grow the company so that we can compete with large publishers on an equal basis. We also want to be able to, back one slide. Yeah. We also want to be able to attract and build a good team in the company. And in places like the Bay Area and London, that's very difficult when you have large companies trying to steal away your top software developers all the time and things like that. So we need to be able to pay good salaries and incentivize people in the way that the private companies do. We also needed to be able to attract investment in order to grow and build the company. And all of that then enables us to compete with the larger publishers. So that's the critical reason why we are for profit. Next, please. So at the same time, we're an unconditionally open publisher. And when we started off, people sort of reacted a little bit like the cartoon on the left of the screen, saying that, you're just being idealistic, there's no business model that will work, etc. But for us, being unconditionally open was really, really important because it's all about the role of a scholarly publisher. Our role is to help with the social contract of academia, which is that, as you can see, it's behind this big cross on the screen because I've taken off my animations, but that researchers will disseminate their work, they will allow others to validate it and build upon it and so forth. And for us, anyone who's involved in disseminating work as a publisher who puts paywalls up, who doesn't ensure that the data associated with work, etc., is properly archived and released, is breaking that social contract. They're blocking it, and they're limiting scientific communication, and that's what Geoffrey Bolton of the Royal Society in the UK would call, or very vocally calls, scientific malpractice. So for us, it's very, very critical that everything we do is open, and getting started in that kind of environment of sort of the beginning of the open revolution in science meant that there was no question whatsoever about being anything other than an open access publisher for us. Okay, next slide, please. And so we take that then and we try to have to realize as many of the benefits as possible of open access and all aspects of open science. So we focus in on things like the benefits for the researchers, but a lot more about the benefits to the research community of being able to reuse open materials and drive growth with much more efficient work, and also the public benefits of greater trust in science, validation of research, and returning the results of research back to the private sector who pay equally pay tax to fund most of the research as well. So overall, it's not just a question of doing this purely for the research community. It's because being an open publisher is to the benefit of all of society as well. Next, please. And so what we've done is, in order to try and be, as was said earlier, a good citizen as a for-profit organization, we've created a customer charter. And the customer charter guarantees that we will be 100% open access, our entire platform will be 100% open source, and we will never have our products bundled in any way. As was said earlier, as part of a larger product offering or end-to-end solution, etc. Everything we produce will always be available in individual products. And this is also in the case of an acquisition or a large investment in future, that we guarantee the company will continue to operate in this way. And this is then overseen by an advisory board of our larger customers who could veto any acquisition or similar type of activity that didn't agree to these conditions being upheld in future. Next, please. Yep. And at the same time, we're very keen not to involve any lock-in in the platform. So we have, similar to Hindawi, no contractual lock-in whatsoever. Short terms, customers can leave at any time. They can break out of the contract at any time with any reason. We want them to stay because they're happy with the working relationship with us, not because we locked them in. And in the same way that the platform is 100% open source and open access, so the communities we've committed to initially are the PKP Open Journal System community and the Haiku repository community, which is part of Samvera. And the reasons we did this is because we really believe that the work we do on our own platform should benefit a much broader community as well. And with the Open Journal Systems platform, you have tens of thousands of journals already on that platform throughout the world, and everything we can do to improve that platform has a much greater impact beyond just our own bottom line, etc. So which is very important. And one of the things we bring to that is the experience of working in on more commercial journals and with higher volumes and so forth. So we're helping to improve OJS in ways that will make it more suitable for larger publishers and larger journals to work with. And the same thing with Haiku. We're really positioning this as an alternative to some of the commercial repository systems that are out there right now as a fully open source system, which means that someone can use the system on our platform, but if they want to move, they can continue to run it themselves. And in fact, what we will do is we'll actually give them the software containers that the software is running on, and they can continue to move it without even running a full migration or anything. So the idea is people are not locked in. It's really, these are open solutions which enable them to transport their journals and their repositories from provider to provider in the future if need be. And at the same time, we also adhere, of course, to fully open standards, things like JATS, open APIs, so the journals and content can be moved easily. We're members, of course, of things like the NISO transfer agreement, which means we'll transfer everything free of charge immediately if people want to move. So it's very, very much about trying to be kind of the opposite of some of the large legacy publishers in the way that they treat societies and libraries and researchers. Next, please. And the other way we follow that up a little bit is through having fully transparent pricing. We try to make it very, very clear how all of the fees that we charge come about. So when we do charge article processing charges, for example, we're willing to publish a breakdown. We go even further than this sort of high-level diagram and give a full accounting of the labor cost and so forth throughout. And we think that's just very, very important in order to build trust and to show that we're not just trying to skim profits out of the platform. We're being sustainable, but we're growing our business with these charges, but at the same time we're not making unwarranted profits. Especially where this money it comes from funders and library budgets, which are there to support the growth of the scientific community and research, and they're not there to enrich private companies. Next, please. So as I mentioned, we're community driven. This is my last slide. We have a partner advisory board, which is made up of our large institutional customers, and their job is to, apart from helping us steer the company, provide feedback from our partner network and so forth, one of their key roles is to verify that the charter is being upheld, and that in any case, if there is a significant investment, then it continues to be upheld. And at the same time, what we're doing right now is we're putting together partnership rules which determine who we will integrate and work with. So when we integrate a new technology or third-party system into our platform, we make sure that they follow similar kinds of rules, that they have accountability to the community, etc. Because what we don't want to see is a new company come onto our platform, skim off a lot of the data, and then end up behind the walls of a large publisher that community doesn't approve of. So we're very, very careful about that. And we're going to publish those partnership rules probably in the next 3 months or so, and hope maybe that some other companies will pick them up as well. And that's it from me. I think that the key thing there is that we've really doubled down on our involvement with the OJS system, Haiku system. We're also involved with Coco through the Collabora Journal, which is on our platform with University of California Press. And what we'll be doing is once we've finished a lot of the major integration work with open journal systems, we'll start turning to Coco and looking at ways in which we can contribute to that platform and integrate it better with the OJS platform, and look at where the synergies are there.
Thank you very much, Brian. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Anita.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to do now is I wanted to turn away from the publishers, because we are not really a publisher, and I wanted to go into what our main problem is with actual publications. So this is again in the STEM field, and I'm not sure why that box is black, but it should be opaque, but whatever. But in any case, the kinds of things that you're going to see with a lot of STEM publications are really summarized here. And this is a general problem with a lot of different types of STEM data. So in this particular case, this is one of the large publishers who shall remain nameless, but this can happen to anyone. There is a particular author who says, hey, I use this mouse, and this mouse's name, according to this author, is NOD PK SCID IL-2 receptor gamma chain null mouse. Now he tells you where he got it, and unfortunately, when you go to the website of the Jackson Laboratory, which is where this author said that they got this mouse, there is actually nothing in that particular repository that matches the name of this particular mouse. So you want to ask the question, well, why is that? Well, it turns out that about half the time, according to our colleagues Vasilevsky et al., and it doesn't matter what the impact factor is of the particular journal. It doesn't matter whether the paper is open or closed, whether the standards in the editorial process are lax or not so lax. About half the time, you cannot find these research resources, and so more than half the time, you cannot reproduce this paper, because how could you reproduce a paper where you cannot find the basic research resource, the mouse, which is the subject of the study? You cannot find it, therefore you cannot reproduce this paper. So if you go to the next slide, the way that we address this in the community is, well, we basically emailed the author, right? And when I did this, I emailed this author. He said, oh, that's no problem. The mouse is actually 5763. That's the stock number of the mouse. And if you notice there, the name of this mouse from Jackson Laboratory is actually B6129 S1-NOD2 TM1FLV/J. Just rolls off the tongue, right? So you can see like some of the characters are almost the same, but really they're not. So that's the name of the mouse, and the nickname of the mouse is being used by the author. So we thought, well, how could we possibly solve this problem with publishers? So if you go to the next slide. Now here is this magical solution that we have. We ask the author to put in the stock number that the author already has into the paper. I know, this is totally magic. And anyway, when we did this with 25 journals, some of them open, some of them closed, some of them with big publishers, and some of them with small. We don't really differentiate because we wanted to solve this problem for the broader community. And so when we worked with these 25 journals, what we found is that when we asked journals, when we asked authors to do this, to basically tag these research resources in papers, 90% of the time now they were findable. They were able to be, someone was able to go back and figure this out. Next slide, please. Now this has taken off. So we started in 2014, and at the end of 2014, at the end of the pilot phase, we actually had 25 journals, and we had exactly 100 papers published with these things, these RIDs in them. And at that point, we said, okay, let's look at this data and let's try to publish a paper about it. Let's figure out, what worked and what didn't work. But by the time the paper was published, we already had about 800 papers, which, signaled to us that this was really taking off and there needed to be more. By 2016 and 2017, we had some of the big publishers, some open, like eLife, some closed, like Cell Press. But the fact of the matter is this is where people publish, and this is whom we have to talk to. So the latest actually is Nature Publishing Group. So this is great, and this is where we are. Next slide, please. Okay, so solving this problem in STEM publishing requires, we believe, a blended solution and a blended approach that really affects a lot of different stakeholders in slightly different ways. So authors obviously are a stakeholder community, which, a lot of them have said, evil empire, publishing, terrible, terrible, terrible. However, they actually submit mostly to for-profit companies as publishers. So they will go to, certainly to a lot of the open publishers, but they'll also go to Nature, and they will also go to Cell Press, and they will also go to these big closed journals, because in a lot of the cases, these are the most respected journals, the oldest journals in a particular community. So they will say, definitely, we'd like, we would like to work with non-commercial partners. But they, it turns out they use a lot of commercial things. Journals mostly are commercial. Now, there are certainly noted exceptions to this, but all journals are actually concerned about the bottom line to some extent. Certainly, working with commercial and non-commercial partners would be required for a company like SciCrunch, and I'll get into that a little bit more, to actually effectively work with the full community. We also work with reagent companies. So some reagent companies and some resource providers, you might want to say. So the mouse providers, the mouse repositories, the Drosophila repositories, anyone who has a particular critter that they would like to make available to the community is potentially a person that we want to talk to. And a lot of these people, these providers are commercial. A lot of them are nonprofit. So again, we have to really talk to both commercial and non-commercial partners in order to make sure that when the author goes and actually tries to find their identifier for the particular thing that they used, they're able to find that particular identifier. They don't have to go in and they don't have to register that at the time of publication, because this is typically a very stressful time. So we want to be able to work with everyone to bring this data together so that it is as easy as possible for the author to be able to fulfill this requirement. And funders, of course, would love to make sure that all of the papers that are published, no matter where they're published, have improved reproducibility in terms of the science that they fund. Whether that is, again, in a closed, in an open, or in anything else, that data should be reproducible. Next slide, please. Okay, So the RRID solution actually requires a blended approach because of the different stakeholders. So the non-commercial portion of all of this is that we in SciCrunch need to absolutely ensure that everything right around the RRIDs is as free and open as possible. And so we have actually licensed the RRIDs at a CC0 license for all of that content. And we make it available through the event database at Crossref, and we make it available to anyone who wishes to use it. Now, what this does, we think, is it ensures that no matter what happens to our organization, our institution, that data, that content that was put there for the community continues to be there and it continues to exist. And if a partner that is a non-commercial partner wishes to pick this up, they can do so. All of the content is free and open. But on the commercial side, we've actually, we have incorporated more recently than the RRIDs have come about, but we have incorporated because, in fact, talking from with the hat of a university professor or university researcher, university project, to some of the bigger commercial companies, it's a little bit difficult because they're not sure who can, for example, sign a contract, right? So we have been providing data to a lot of commercial organizations, also non-commercial organizations, but it is much easier, we find, when we are asked to, for example, create tools, do a specific piece of work, that there is an entity there that stands behind that contract that can quickly sign that contract, that can then work with the commercial organizations who are part of this marketplace. We did not invent them. Lots of scientists use commercial reagents, commercial kits, and so these things are part of the landscape. We cannot ignore them. So again, funding avenues also, are one of the interesting parts. We actually initially thought that we should be a nonprofit, but what really, solidified our decision to become a for-profit entity was actually that there's a really nice funding avenue called the Small Business Innovation Award. So this is the SBIR mechanism out of the National Institutes of Health, where we've been able to get a reasonable amount of development money without us having to go to, the big investors, the angels, or the venture capitalists. This is funding that is available for companies that are acting in the public good, but really are only for-profit companies. So those awards are not available to nonprofits as far as we understand. Therefore, we wanted to get these things. We got some of them, and so we are a for-profit. Next slide, please. So, what I wanted to just say, and my talk is going to be very short, because essentially what we're trying to do with the company, and that's the little SciCrunch icon there in the center towards the bottom, is that the company is supporting parts of the big open infrastructure. If you look at NIF, the Neuroscience Information Framework, where a lot of this technology came from, everything is still free. It's open for all non-commercial purposes, and this project still continues to exist. It continues to gather data. The code base is there, again, free and open for all non-commercial purposes, but the SciCrunch component is actually the part that we can say builds the widgets and the tools around the open infrastructure that has been put together by National Institutes of Health funding. It capitalizes on the fact that there are needs which large institutions are not really good at filling. And it is able to be nimble and quick in terms of being able to, again, talk to big commercial partners. So RIDs are the objects, the identifiers that we have, in a sense, created out of a lot of working group decisions out of the National Institutes of Health. The journal editors were involved with all of the creation of this particular identifier system. UCSD, through the work at the Neuroscience Information Framework and through funding from the NIDDK, which is the National Institutes of Digestive and Kidney Disorders, have funded the support of these identifiers. And these things, again, need to be free, open to use, but again, the filling and the interaction between and the filling of this data from commercial places, from places like Thermo Fisher, come into this open data infrastructure through a company, because that company can stand behind the relationship between those external commercial places and this big open infrastructure and this system. So in a sense, we are still, and we will continue to kind of straddle these two worlds, always keeping in mind that our goal with the company is to provide services on top of the large open infrastructure to help the large open infrastructure improve the data quality, but never to own the large open data infrastructure. So this is our principle and this is our goal. Again, we're looking forward to continued collaboration and cooperation with all parts of the publishing system in STEM. I look forward to any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our audience, and if you have a question for any one of our presenters, please use the Q&A window to post your question. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I would like to take this opportunity to thank David Lewis and Michael Roy. They are the curators of this series. As I mentioned earlier, this is the 4th web seminar in our Hot Topics series. The previous 3 have been recorded, and both the slides and recordings are available on the DuraSpace.org website. And I would also like to thank the members of DuraSpace. Without you, our organization would not be the strong organization that it is, so we always appreciate your support. Doesn't look like we have any questions at this time. So again, on behalf of DuraSpace, thank you very much, Andrew, Brian, and Anita, for sharing your information and your organization's mission with our members. I would like to thank all of you for your time today. This concludes our session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.